A maid's daughter gave up her scholarship to aid a wounded stranger, not knowing he was a billionaire's heir. Welcome to True Soul Narratives, where every story carries a heartbeat, love, betrayal, forgiveness, and the courage to start again. If this story resonates with you, subscribe and leave a like. Now, Besham, let's return to the story. The alley was dark, the kind of dark that swallowed sound and made every shadow feel alive. Elena Carter's footsteps echoed against the wet pavement as she hurried through, her backpack heavy with textbooks, her mind racing with everything she needed to say in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That's all the time she had before the phone call that would change her life. Then she heard it, a groan, low, pained, desperate. She stopped, her breath catching. A head-on, barely visible under the flickering streetlight, a man stumbled forward. His shirt was dark with blood, his face pale, his hand pressed against his head, where crimson streamed through his fingers. He was well-dressed, expensive watch glinting on his wrist, but none of that mattered because he was dying. "Help," he gasped, his eyes unfocused. "Please." And then he collapsed, right there, right at her feet. Elena's phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. She looked at the screen. Hillcrest Medical Scholarship Committee. This was it, the call, the final interview. 4 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of choosing textbooks over meals, all leading to this one moment. Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone. Answer it, and secure your future. But the man on the ground wasn't breathing right. Blood pooled beneath his head, dark and spreading. His chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate gasps. Elena's finger hovered over the green button. One tap. That's all it would take. But then she heard her mother's voice, soft and steady, from a memory years old. "We don't have much, mija, but we have our humanity." In that moment, Elena Carter threw away 4 years of sacrifice for a stranger she'd never met. She hung up on the scholarship committee and dialed 911. But to understand why, you need to know where she came from. Elena Carter wasn't born into privilege. She was born into service. Her mother, Maria Carter, was a live-in maid for the Westbrook family, one of the wealthiest families in the city. They lived in a mansion with 12 bedrooms, marble floors, and chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. But Elena and her mother didn't live in the mansion. They lived in the servant quarters, a small converted garage behind the main house with thin walls and a heater that only worked half the time. Elena grew up watching from the shadows. She'd see the Westbrook children come home from private schools in chauffeur-driven cars while she took 2 buses to get to her public school. She'd watch them throw away food that could have fed her and her mother for days. She'd hear them complain about things that seemed like dreams to her, vacations to Europe, new cars for their 16th birthdays, college funds that never ran dry. But Elena didn't hate them. She just learned. She learned that the world was divided into people who had everything and people who had to fight for scraps. And she decided very early on that she would fight. She was brilliant, not just smart, but hungry. The kind of student who stayed up until 3 a.m. studying because sleep was a luxury and knowledge was survival. By the time she was in high school, she had a 4.0 GPA and 3 part-time jobs. She worked at a coffee shop before school, tutored kids in the evening, and cleaned offices on weekends. Every dollar went into 2 places, her mother's medication and her future. Because Maria Carter had early onset diabetes. Diagnosed at 39, her body failing faster than it should, the insulin and doctor visits costing more than they could ever afford. Elena watched her mother's hands shake in the mornings, watched her hide the pain behind the smiles, watched her work 12-hour days cleaning other people's homes even when her own body was breaking down. Elena was their only hope, the only way out. And she knew it. So when the acceptance letter came from Hillcrest Medical School with the words "full scholarship finalist" at the top, Elena had cried for the first time in years. This was it. This was the door she'd been clawing at her entire life. Medical school, a degree, a career where she could save people like her mother, where she'd never have to choose between medicine and rent. But there was one final step, the interview, a 15-minute phone call where the scholarship committee would ask her questions assess her dedication, decide if she was worthy. They told her explicitly, if you miss this call, the scholarship goes to the alternate candidate. One chance, no exceptions. Elena had prepared for weeks. She knew every answer, every story she'd tell, every reason why she deserved this more than anyone else. She'd planned her route home from the library down to the minute. Walk fast, cut through the alley, get home by 8:50, compose herself, answer the phone at exactly 9 o'clock p.m. Everything had been perfect, until it wasn't. At 8:47 p.m., Elena was walking through that alley, her mind rehearsing answers, when she heard the groan, when she saw the man bleeding, when everything she'd worked for collided with a choice she never wanted to make. Her phone rang at 8:55 p.m., right on time. She stared at the man on the ground, his blood on her hands now from where she'd checked his pulse, and she made a decision that would haunt her. She hung up, and she called 911. There's a man, he's hurt badly, bleeding from the head, barely conscious, Elena said, her voice shaking as she gave the dispatcher the address. Please hurry. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. Paramedics rushed out, loaded the man onto a stretcher, asked Elena questions she barely remembered answering. Did she know him? No. What happened? She didn't know. Was she coming with them? She looked at the man, unconscious and pale, and something told her she couldn't leave him alone. Yes, she said, I'm coming. She climbed into the ambulance and watched as they worked to stabilize him, checking vitals, applying pressure to the wound, speaking in medical shorthand she'd studied but never heard in real life. The sirens wailed above them, and Elena sat in the corner, numb, her phone clutched in her hand. At 9:03 p.m., her phone buzzed. An email from Hillcrest Medical School. Dear Ms. Carter, thank you for your interest in the Hillcrest Medical Scholarship Program. Due to your absence from the scheduled interview, the scholarship has been awarded to the alternate candidate. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Elena read the words once, twice, 3 times. They didn't change. The scholarship was gone. 4 years of perfect grades, of sleepless nights, of sacrificing everything. Gone in one decision. She felt her throat tighten, her vision blur. She wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to rewind time and make a different choice. But she couldn't, because the man on the stretcher was still breathing, and that had to mean something. At the hospital, they rushed him into emergency care. Elena sat in the waiting room alone, her clothes stained with his blood, her mind empty. She didn't cry. She couldn't. The tears were there, building behind her eyes. But she held them back because if she started, she didn't think she'd ever stop. 2 hours later, a doctor came out, a woman in scrubs with kind eyes and tired shoulders. Are you family? No, Elena said quietly. I just found him. The doctor smiled softly. Well, you saved his life. Another 10 minutes, and he wouldn't have made it. The words should have felt like something. Pride, maybe, relief. But all Elena felt was hollow. He's awake, the doctor continued, if you'd like to see him. Elena hesitated, then nodded. She didn't know why. Maybe because she needed to see that her choice had mattered. Maybe because she needed someone to tell her it was worth it. She walked into the room, and there he was, the stranger. He was sitting up slightly, a bandage wrapped around his head, his face still pale but his eyes alert. When he saw her, confusion flickered across his face. Who are you? He asked, his voice hoarse. Elena forced a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Just someone who was in the right place. You saved me, he said, and there was something in his tone, gratitude, wonder, guilt. The doctors told me, you called 911. You stayed. Elena nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. I'm Ethan, he said. Ethan Cross. Elena. Elena, he repeated like he was trying to memorize it. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. She wanted to laugh. Repay her? He couldn't give her back what she'd lost. No one could. You don't owe me anything, she said quietly. I'm just glad you're okay. Ethan studied her, his eyes sharp despite the pain medication. You don't look okay. Elena's walls cracked, just slightly. I'm fine, she lied. just tired. But she wasn't fine. She was shattered. And as she turned to leave to walk out of that hospital and back into a life that suddenly had no clear path forward, she heard Ethan call after her. Wait, please. At least let me get your number so I can thank you properly. Elena paused at the door. She didn't turn around. You already did. And then she left, disappearing into the night before he could ask anything else. Before he could see the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Before she had to admit that saving his life might have cost her everything. If this story is already pulling at your heart, subscribe to True Soul Narratives, because we're just getting started and what happens next will leave you speechless. What would you have done in Elena's position? Would you have answered the phone or saved the stranger? Let us know in the comments below. Elena walked through the door of their small apartment at 3 a.m., her hands still shaking, her mind still replaying the email over and over. Scholarship awarded to alternate candidate. The words burned into her brain like a brand she couldn't escape. Her mother was asleep on the worn couch, the television flickering softly in the corner. Maria had waited up, like she always did, but exhaustion had won. Elena stood there for a long moment, just watching her mother breathe, watching the rise and fall of her chest, and she felt something crack inside her. She'd failed. After everything, she'd failed. The next morning, Maria found Elena at the kitchen table staring at nothing, her coffee untouched and cold. Mija, Maria said softly, sitting down across from her. How did the interview go? Elena couldn't look at her. She couldn't bear to see the hope in her mother's eyes, the hope she was about to destroy. I didn't make the call. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. What do you mean? Maria asked, her voice careful, controlled. There was a man, Elena said, her words coming out flat, emotionless. He was dying. I had to help him. I missed the interview. The scholarship is gone. Maria's face crumbled. Just for a second, just long enough for Elena to see the devastation, the fear, the weight of their entire future collapsing. But then Maria reached across the table and took Elena's hand, squeezing it tight. You did the right thing, Mija, Maria said, her voice firm even as tears gathered in her eyes. You saved a life, that's what matters. But Elena saw through it. She saw the worry her mother tried to hide, the way her hand trembled slightly, the way her eyes flickered to the medicine bottles on the counter. Expensive little reminders of everything they couldn't afford. They were running out of options, running out of time, and Elena had just thrown away their only lifeline. I'm sorry, Mama, Elena whispered, her voice breaking. Don't, Maria said sharply. Don't apologize for being the person I raised you to be. We'll figure this out. We always do. But this time, Elena wasn't sure they would. The next day, Elena picked up extra shifts at the diner where she'd been working part-time. Now it became full-time, double shifts, triple when she could get them. She worked mornings, afternoons, nights, her feet aching, her body screaming for rest she couldn't afford to take. Medical school felt like a dream from another lifetime, something that had happened to someone else. Now there was only this, endless coffee refills, greasy plates, and customers who never tipped enough. Every night she came home smelling like French fries and defeat. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan Cross was healing. The stitches in his head would leave a scar, the doctor said, a permanent reminder of the night he'd almost died. But the physical wound wasn't what haunted him. It was her, the girl with sad eyes who'd saved his life and disappeared like smoke. He'd been mugged that night. He remembered bits and pieces, walking through an unfamiliar neighborhood, trying to clear his head, trying to escape. Then hands grabbing him, shoving him against a wall, demands for his wallet, his watch. He'd fought back, stupid in hindsight, and they'd hit him hard. With something metal, he remembered the crack, the burst of pain, the world tilting sideways. He remembered lying on the ground, bleeding, knowing he was going to die there. Alone, Diman. Forgotten, and then she'd appeared, an angel in the dark. Ethan asked the hospital for her information, desperate to find her, to thank her properly. But privacy laws blocked him at every turn. The hospital staff gave him sympathetic looks and said they couldn't help. She'd left no contact information, no address, nothing but the memory of her voice saying, just someone who was in the right place. But Ethan couldn't let it go. Who gives up everything for a stranger? Who risks their own life, their own time, for someone they don't even know? The question consumed him, haunted his dreams, made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Because Ethan Cross wasn't just some random guy she'd saved. He was the heir to Cross Industries, a billion-dollar empire built on real estate, technology, and investments that stretched across 3 continents. His father, William Cross, was a legend in business circles. Ruthless, brilliant, cold. A man who saw people as assets or liabilities, nothing in between. Ethan had grown up in that world. Boarding schools, business dinners, expectations that crushed before you even knew you were carrying them. His father demanded perfection, demanded that Ethan become a carbon copy, a successor worthy of the Cross name. But Ethan didn't want it. He didn't want the boardrooms, the mergers, the endless pursuit of more. He wanted meaning. He wanted to matter for something other than his last name. That night, he'd been walking through the city, trying to escape, trying to breathe. He'd ended up in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time, and it had nearly killed him. His family didn't know how close he'd come. They thought he had been in a car accident, some minor thing, and Ethan hadn't corrected them. Because telling them the truth meant admitting he'd been running, and Cross men didn't run. But that girl, Elena, she'd saved him. And Ethan realized something in the quiet days of his recovery. She'd saved his life, but at what cost to her own? He had to find her. He had to know. 3 weeks later, Ethan was still searching. He tracked down the ambulance route, mapped out every neighborhood within a 5-mile radius, visited hospitals, clinics, coffee shops, anywhere someone like her might work or live. Was it even Amo? It was obsessive. He knew that. But he couldn't stop, and then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, he found her. The diner was small, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the kind of place that served breakfast all day and had coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since morning. Ethan almost walked past it, but something made him look through the window. And there she was, Elena, wearing a faded uniform, her hair pulled back, exhaustion written in every line of her face. She was refilling someone's coffee, moving mechanically, like she was running on fumes and nothing else. Ethan's heart stopped. It's her! He walked in, the bell above the door chiming softly. Elena looked up out of habit, her customer service smile already in place, but it faltered when she saw him. She didn't recognize him at first. He'd been bloody, disoriented, barely conscious the last time she'd seen him. But now he was clean, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, his face familiar, but out of context. He sat at her table. She approached slowly, order pad in hand, her eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to place him. What can I get you? It's you, Ethan said softly. Elena froze. Her eyes widened, the pieces clicking into place. The stranger, the man from the alley. What are you doing here? Looking for you, Ethan said. For 3 weeks, I've been looking everywhere. Elena's face hardened. She glanced around the diner, suddenly self-conscious, suddenly aware of how she must look. Tired, worn down, nothing like the composed person she tried to be. You shouldn't have. I had to thank you, Ethan insisted. Properly. You saved my life. You already thanked me, Elena said, her tone clipped. She started to turn away, but Ethan reached out, not touching her, just close enough to stop her. Please, he said, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Elena hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away, to keep the walls up, to not let this stranger back into her life. But something in his eyes, desperation, gratitude, something real made her pause. 5 minutes, she said finally. Then you leave. She sat down across from him, her arms crossed, her defenses high. Ethan studied her, seeing the exhaustion up close now, the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Why did you help me? Ethan asked. That night, you didn't know me. You had somewhere to be, Tobam. But you stayed. Anyone would have done the same, Elena said, the words automatic, rehearsed. But they didn't, Ethan countered gently. You did. and I need to know why." Elena looked away, her jaw tightening. She didn't want to talk about this, didn't want to relive that night, the choice, the consequences. But Ethan wasn't going to let it go. She could see it in his eyes. "What were you doing that night?" he pressed. "Where were you going?" Elena's throat tightened. She didn't owe him an explanation, didn't owe him anything. But the words came anyway, pulled out of her by exhaustion and grief and the weight of carrying it alone for too long. "I was on my way to change my life," she said quietly. "Instead, I saved yours." Ethan went still. "What do you mean?" Elena met his eyes, and for the first time he saw it. The pain, the loss, the resentment she'd been holding back. "I had a scholarship interview, full ride to medical school. 4 years of work, everything I'd sacrificed, all leading to that one phone call. And I missed it because I was too busy keeping you alive." The words hung between them, sharp and accusing. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Medical school, a scholarship, 4 years of work, gone because of him. "I didn't know," he whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "How could you?" Elena said bitterly. "You were unconscious." Ethan's mind raced. He had to fix this, had to do something. "Let me help you," he said urgently. "Let me pay for school. I have money, I can—" "No," Elena cut him off, her voice sharp. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Ethan argued. "It's repaying a debt." "I don't want your money," Elena said firmly, standing up. "I need a job, a real job, not a handout, not your guilt, just a chance to earn my way back." Ethan stood too, desperate now. He couldn't let her walk away. Not like this, not when he could help. "Wait, please, I have an idea." Elena stopped, her hand on the back of the chair, her body language screaming that she wanted to leave, but something, curiosity, desperation kept her there. "My family's company," Ethan said quickly. "We have a charitable foundation. It needs someone to run it, someone organized, passionate, someone who understands what it means to struggle. The pay is good, full benefits, real work, not a pity job. You'd be perfect for it." Elena stared at him, suspicion written all over her face. "Why would you do that?" "Because you saved my life," Ethan said simply, "and because I think you'd be incredible at it." "This isn't charity, Elena. It's a job offer. One you'd have to earn, just like anything else." Elena's mind word. She needed the money. Desperately. Her mother's medication costs were climbing, their rent was overdue, and working at the diner wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But taking a job from him felt like accepting defeat, like admitting she needed saving. "I don't know you," she said finally. "Then get to know me," Ethan replied. "One interview. If you hate it, walk away, no hard feelings." Elena looked at him for a long moment. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the guilt, the hope, and underneath it all, she saw something else. Respect. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her like an equal. "Fine," Elena said, her voice hard, "but I earned my place, no special treatment, no favors. If I'm not good enough, you fire me." Ethan smiled, relief flooding through him. "Deal." Elena turned to walk away, then paused. "And Ethan, don't make me regret this." "I won't," he promised. But as she walked back to the counter, back to refilling coffee and taking orders, Ethan realized something. He didn't just want to repay her. He wanted to know her, to understand the woman who'd given up everything for a stranger. And that terrified him more than he wanted to admit. Elena's first day at Cross Industries felt like stepping into a different universe. The building was all glass and steel, towering 40 stories above the city, with marble floors so polished she could see her reflection. She wore her only professional outfit, a black blazer and skirt she'd bought secondhand, and tried not to feel like an imposter as employees in designer suits brushed past her. But Elena didn't come here to blend in. She came here to prove herself. The charitable foundation was a mess. Files disorganized, donation records scattered across 3 different systems, grant applications piling up unanswered. It was clear no one had been paying attention, that this foundation was more about tax breaks than actually helping people. Elena saw it all in the first hour, and something inside her ignited. She worked, not like someone grateful for a job, like someone with something to prove. Within 2 weeks, she'd reorganized the entire database, streamlined the application process, and identified 12 projects that were being funded inefficiently. She created reports, built spreadsheets, stayed late every night making sure everything was perfect. Because perfect was the only option when people were waiting for you to fail. And people were waiting. Elena heard the whispers in the break room, saw the looks when she walked past. The employees at Cross Industries knew who she was, or thought they did, the maid's daughter. The girl Ethan had pulled out of nowhere and given a job she didn't deserve. One afternoon, Elena was in the copy room when she heard voices on the other side of the wall. Two women, their tones sharp with judgment. "She's probably using him," one said. "Saved his life so she could get her hooks in." "Classic gold digger move," the other agreed. "And Ethan's too nice to see it. She probably planned the whole thing." Elena stood frozen, the papers in her hand trembling. The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. She'd worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and still, this is what they thought. That she was using him. That she was a liar, a manipulator, someone who didn't belong. She didn't confront them, she just worked harder, stayed later, made herself indispensable. Because words didn't matter. Results did. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. He watched her from his office on the 20th floor, saw the way she moved through the building with her head high and her walls higher. He saw the exhaustion she tried to hide, the way she flinched when certain employees walked past, the determination in every step. They started working late together. Not because he assigned her tasks, but because they both seemed to find reasons to stay. Elena would be finishing reports, and Ethan would appear with coffee, asking if she needed help. At first, she'd refuse, but slowly the walls began to crack. One night around 10 p.m., they were in the foundation office reviewing grant proposals when Ethan asked, "Why do you work so hard?" Elena didn't look up from her laptop. "Because I have to." "But why?" Ethan pressed gently. "You've already proven yourself. Everyone can see you're brilliant." Elena finally met his eyes. "Not everyone." Ethan understood. He'd heard the rumors too, seen the looks. It made him angry in a way he couldn't quite express. "They're wrong about you." "Are they?" Elena asked quietly. "I'm the maid's daughter who got a job because I saved the boss's life. That's all they see. And maybe that's all I am." "That's not all you are," Ethan said firmly. "You're the woman who gave up her dream to save a stranger. The woman who works harder than anyone I've ever met. The woman who's rebuilt this foundation in 2 weeks when it's been failing for years. That's who you are." Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but belief was a luxury she couldn't afford. "What about you?" she asked, changing the subject. "Why are you here so late? Don't billionaire heirs have better things to do?" Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'd think." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. "My father wants me to take over the company. He's been grooming me for it since I was a kid, but I don't want it. I don't want the board meetings, the hostile takeovers, the constant pursuit of more. I want to do something that matters." "And he doesn't understand that," Elena said. It wasn't a question. "No," Ethan admitted. "To him, purpose and profit are the same thing. He thinks I'm weak, idealistic, wasting my potential." Well, Elena studied him, seeing past the expensive clothes and the family name to the person underneath. Someone trapped, just like her. "You know what the worst part was?" Elena said softly. "Growing up the way I did, it wasn't being poor, it was being treated like we were invisible, like we didn't matter because we didn't have money." Ethan's eyes filled with understanding. "You did matter. You do matter." "Do I?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Or am I just another project for you? Another way to feel like you're making a difference?" "You're not a project," Ethan said, leaning forward, his voice intense. "You're the most real person I've ever met." The air between them shifted, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. Elena looked away first, clearing her throat. "We should get back to work." But the moment lingered long after they'd returned to their laptops. A week later, Ethan asked if he could meet her mother. Elena resisted at first, embarrassed by their small apartment, by the contrast between his world and hers. But Ethan insisted, and eventually she gave in. Maria was waiting when they arrived, the apartment cleaned within an inch of its life, the smell of homemade empanadas filling the small space. She greeted Ethan with warmth that made Elena's chest ache, treating him not like a billionaire, but like a guest, someone worthy of her best dishes and her brightest smile. They ate dinner at the tiny kitchen table, Maria asking Ethan questions about his work, his family, his life. Ethan answered honestly, charmed by her directness, by the way she looked at him like he was just a man, not an heir or a name. After dinner, while Elena was washing dishes, Maria pulled Ethan aside into the small living room. Her smile faded, replaced by something serious, protective. "My daughter gave up her dream for you," Maria said quietly, her eyes fierce. "Her whole future. And I'm grateful you gave her a job, truly. But if you're playing games, if you're going to hurt her, I need you to walk away now." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. "I'm not playing games, Mrs. Carter, I promise." "Good," Maria said. "Because Elena, she's strong, but she's been hurt enough. She doesn't need more pain, especially not from someone she's starting to trust." The words haunted Ethan long after he'd left their apartment. Starting to trust. Was Elena starting to trust him? And more importantly, what did he plan to do about it? 2 weeks later, Elena got the call that shattered everything. Her mother had collapsed at work. Diabetes complications. She was in the hospital, and the doctors said she needed immediate treatment, medication adjustments, monitoring. Expensive monitoring. Elena sat in the hospital waiting room, her head in her hands, the financial estimates in her lap. Numbers that might as well have been millions. She didn't have this. Even with her new job, even with the better salary, she didn't have this. That's where Ethan found her. He'd been in a meeting when his assistant mentioned seeing Elena leave in a panic. He'd followed his instincts, tracked her down, and now stood in the doorway watching her fall apart. "Elena," he said softly. She looked up, her face wet with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. "She's sick, really sick, and I can't afford it. I can't save her." Ethan sat beside her and without thinking, pulled her into his arms. Elena resisted for half a second, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. "Let me help," he whispered. "Please. I can't keep taking from you." Elena choked out. "I can't be that person." "You're not taking," Ethan said, his voice fierce. "I'm giving. There's a difference. Let me do this. Let me help your mother." Elena pulled back, looking at him through tears. She saw no pity in his eyes, just care. Just desperation to do something, anything, to ease her pain. And she realized she had no choice. Pride didn't matter when your mother was dying. "Okay," she whispered. Ethan paid for everything. Not directly, but through the hospital's charitable fund, anonymous donations that covered Maria's treatment in full. Elena found out 2 days later when the billing department told her the balance was zero. She stormed into Ethan's office, furious. "You said you wouldn't do this." "I said I'd help," Ethan replied calmly. "And I did, without asking me. Because you would have said no." Elena stared at him, anger and gratitude warring inside her. "I can't pay you back." "I don't want you to," Ethan said. "Your mother is alive. That's payment enough." Elena felt her anger crumble. She sank into the chair across from his desk, exhausted. "Why do you keep saving me?" "Because you saved me first," Ethan said simply. "And because I were..." He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Because you what?" Elena asked, her voice quiet. "Because I care about you," Ethan admitted. "More than I should." The confession hung between them, heavy and terrifying. Elena stood slowly, her heart racing. "Ethan." "I know," he said, standing too. "I know all the reasons this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop wanting to be near you." They were close now, too close. Elena could feel the heat radiating off him, could see the vulnerability in his eyes. And before she could stop herself, she leaned in. Their lips were inches apart when reality crashed back. Elena pulled away, her hand on his chest, stopping him. I can't, she whispered. You're my boss. I'm the maid's daughter. This doesn't work. I don't care about any of that, Ethan said desperately. But the world does, Elena said, her voice breaking. They already think I'm using you. If this happens, it'll destroy everything I've worked for, everything I am. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her the world could go to hell, but he saw the fear in her eyes, the walls slamming back into place, and he knew pushing would only drive her away. Okay, he said quietly, stepping back. Okay. But as Elena left his office, as the distance grew between them, both of them knew the same truth. It was already too late. They'd already fallen, and no amount of walls or worry could change that. William Cross didn't become a billionaire by missing details. He noticed everything, the way his son came home later each night, the distracted look during family dinners, the way Ethan's eyes lit up when he talked about the foundation. Something had changed, and William Cross didn't like change he couldn't control. It took him less than a week to find out about Elena. One conversation with his head of security, one background check, and suddenly William knew everything. Elena Carter, 22, daughter of Maria Carter, live-in maid for the Westbrook family. No family money, no connections, no pedigree. Just a girl who'd saved his son's life and somehow wormed her way into a job at his company. William saw it immediately. The angle, the play. She was smart, he'd give her that. Save the heir, gain his gratitude, manipulate his guilt, and secure a future she could never earn on her own. Classic. He confronted Ethan in his office on a Thursday morning, closing the door with a finality that made the air feel thin. We need to talk about Elena Carter, William said, his voice cold and precise. Ethan looked up from his laptop, his jaw tightening. What about her? She saved your life so she could trap you, William said bluntly. And you're falling for it. That's not true, Ethan said, standing his hands clenched. You don't know her. I know enough, William replied, dropping a folder on the desk. Daughter of a maid, no education beyond community college. Working multiple jobs before you handed her a position she's not qualified for. Tell me, son, does that sound like coincidence to you? She's brilliant, Ethan shot back. She's rebuilt the foundation in a month. She's done more good than anyone in this company has done in years. She's using you, William said, his voice hard. And when she's extracted everything she can, she'll leave. Or worse, she'll stay and bleed you dry for the rest of your life. Ethan felt rage building in his chest. You don't get to talk about her like that. I'm your father, William said, stepping closer. And I'm telling you to end this, now, before it destroys everything we've built. Or what? Ethan challenged. William's eyes went cold. Or I cut you off, completely. No company, no trust fund, no safety net. You'll have nothing. Is that what you want? To throw away your entire future for a girl you barely know? She's not just some girl, Ethan said, his voice shaking with emotion. She's the only real thing in my life. Then you're a fool, William said, and I don't raise fools. Choose, Ethan, the company and your future, or the girl. You have until the end of the week. He walked out, leaving Ethan standing alone in his office, his world crumbling around him. 3 days later, Elena received an unexpected email. A mandatory board meeting. Her presence was required. She didn't understand why the foundation manager would need to attend a board meeting, but she showed up, dressed in her best professional outfit, trying to ignore the anxiety twisting in her stomach. The boardroom was massive, all dark wood and leather chairs, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 20 people sat around the table, executives and board members, all watching her as she entered. Ethan was there too, his face pale, his eyes pleading with her to leave. But before she could, William Cross stood. Miss Carter, he said, his voice smooth and deadly. Thank you for joining us. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. This wasn't a normal meeting. This was a trap. I'll get straight to the point, William continued, walking around the table toward her. My son has developed an unfortunate attachment to you, and I'd like to resolve this situation quickly and cleanly. Elena's breath caught. She looked at Ethan, who was staring at the table, his jaw clenched, his hands fisted. I'm prepared to offer you $500,000, William said, pulling out a check and placing it on the table in front of her. To resign from your position and remove yourself from my son's life permanently. The room went silent. Elena stared at the check, the numbers blurring as humiliation burned through her. This was what they thought of her. What they all thought, that she had a price, that she was for sale. Name your price if that's not enough, William added, his tone almost bored. Everyone has one. Elena's hands trembled. She looked at Ethan, waiting, praying for him to say something, to defend her, to stand up and tell his father he was wrong. But Ethan sat there, silent, torn between the father who'd raised him and the woman who'd saved him. And his silence broke her. She stood slowly, her legs shaking, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. I don't have a price, Mr. Cross. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every person who'd judged her, every person who'd whispered about her. Because I'm not for sale. She turned to Ethan one last time. He finally looked up, his eyes full of anguish. But still he said nothing. And that silence destroyed the last piece of her heart. I resign, Elena said, her voice clear, effective immediately. She walked out of that boardroom with her head high and her heart in pieces. She didn't run. She didn't cry. Not until she reached the elevator. Not until the doors closed and she was alone. Then she collapsed against the wall and sobbed. Elena didn't go back to her apartment. She couldn't. She called her mother from the lobby, told her they had to leave, had to start over somewhere else. Maria didn't ask questions. She heard the break in her daughter's voice and knew. They packed that night, found a small place across the city, somewhere cheaper, somewhere Ethan would never find them. Elena blocked his number, deleted his emails without reading them, went back to working multiple jobs, waitressing, cleaning, anything that would keep her hands busy and her mind from thinking about the man who'd let her be humiliated without saying a word. But she was broken. She'd let herself hope, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone like her could matter to someone like him. And that hope had destroyed her more completely than any poverty ever had. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his penthouse apartment, surrounded by everything money could buy, and felt nothing. His father had won. The company was his. The future was secure. But Elena was gone. He'd tried calling, texting. He'd gone to her apartment and found it empty. She'd disappeared, and he couldn't blame her. He'd failed her. When she needed him most, when his father had tried to buy her like she was nothing, Ethan had sat there, silent, paralyzed by fear of losing everything. And in his silence, he'd lost the only thing that mattered. Ethan realized something in those hollow days. Elena never wanted his money. She'd refused it again and again. She'd worked harder than anyone, proved herself 100 times over. And still, she'd been treated like a gold digger, like someone who didn't belong. But she'd belonged more than anyone in that boardroom, more than him. She'd wanted him, just him, the person, not the name, not the fortune. And he'd let her walk away because he was too afraid to choose her over a legacy that meant nothing without her in it. Ethan stood at his window, looking out at the city, and made a decision. He'd failed her once, but he wouldn't fail her again. Even if it took the rest of his life, he'd find her. And he'd prove he was worthy of the gift she'd given him that night in the alley. He'd prove he was worthy of her. It took Ethan 3 weeks to find her. 3 weeks of searching every diner, every restaurant, every place someone like Elena might work in a city of millions. He hired no one, used no investigators. This was something he had to do himself, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, until finally, on a Tuesday afternoon, he saw her through a window. Elena, pouring coffee, taking orders, moving through the small diner like a ghost of the woman he'd known. Ethan walked in. The bell above the door chimed. Elena looked up, and for a fraction of a second he saw it. Recognition. Pain. Then her face went blank, emotionless, and she turned away. He sat at a corner table, waited. Another waitress came to take his order, but Ethan shook his head. I'm waiting for her, he said, nodding toward Elena. The waitress raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Ethan ordered coffee when Elena finally approached, her order pad out, her eyes fixed on the paper, refusing to look at him. What do you want? She asked, her voice flat. Just coffee, Ethan said quietly, and to sit here. Elena brought him coffee. He drank it slowly, didn't say a word, didn't try to talk to her, just sat there. And when his cup was empty, he left cash on the table, far too much for a single coffee, and walked out. The next day, he came back. Same table, same order, same silence. Elena ignored him, serving other customers, refilling sugar dispensers, doing everything she could to pretend he wasn't there. But he was, and he wasn't leaving. Day 3, day 4, day 7. Every single day, Ethan showed up. He didn't push, didn't make speeches, just sat there drinking coffee, waiting. Other customers started to notice. Whispers followed him. That's the guy. What's he doing here? Why won't she talk to him? Elena felt the pressure building, the weight of his presence, his silence, his persistence. It was driving her insane. On day 12, she finally broke. She walked to his table, slammed down his coffee, and hissed, "What do you want, Ethan?" "To apologize," he said simply, looking up at her with eyes full of regret, "and to ask for your forgiveness." "You had your chance to apologize," Elena said, her voice shaking. "In that boardroom, when your father humiliated me in front of everyone, you sat there, silent." "I know," Ethan said, his voice thick with shame. "I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing everything that I lost the only thing that mattered. You." Elena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You let him treat me like I was nothing." "You're not nothing," Ethan said fiercely, standing now. "You're everything, and I should have told him that, should have walked out with you, should have chosen you over everything else. But I didn't, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, boss." Elena looked away, her jaw clenched, her hands trembling. "Sorry doesn't fix it." "I know," Ethan said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, placing it gently on the table. "But maybe this is a start." Elena stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What is that?" "Open it," Ethan said softly. With shaking hands, Elena opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Official letterhead, Hillcrest Medical School. She scanned the words, her breath catching. "We are pleased to inform you that your application has been reconsidered. Full scholarship, all expenses covered." Elena's legs went weak. She sank into the chair across from Ethan, the letter clutched in her hands. "How?" "I pulled strings," Ethan admitted. "Called in every favor I had. It's funded entirely by me, from my personal account, not the company. No strings attached. It's yours, Elena. Whether you forgive me or not, whether you ever speak to me again or not, this is yours." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "Why would you do this?" "Because you gave up your dream to save my life," Ethan said, his own voice breaking. "The least I can do is give you the chance to live it." Lena shook her head, overwhelmed. "What about your father, the company, your future?" "I walked away," Ethan said, "from all of it. I'm not the heir to Cross Industries anymore. I started my own foundation with my trust fund, something that actually helps people. I choose my own path now, and I choose to spend the rest of my life proving I'm the man you thought I was." Elena's walls, the ones she'd built so carefully, began to crack. "I didn't save you for a reward, Ethan." "I know," he whispered. "You saved me because that's who you are. You're the kind of person who sacrifices everything for a stranger. And I love you for it. I love you, Elena. I should have said it in that boardroom. I should have said it the moment I realized it. But I'm saying it now. I love you." Elena stood slowly, her heart pounding. She walked around the table until she was standing right in front of him. Ethan held his breath, terrified she was about to walk away. "I can't take the scholarship," Elena said. Ethan's face fell, devastation crashing over him. "Elena!" "Because I already reapplied on my own," she continued, a small smile breaking through her tears. "And I got in. I start in the fall." Ethan stared at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "You did?" "I did. Elena said, her smile growing. I wasn't going to let one mistake define me. I fought my way back on my own terms. That's incredible, Ethan breathed. I'm so proud of you. Elena reached out and cupped his face, her thumb brushing away a tear he hadn't realized was falling. But I do forgive you, Ethan, because I understand what it's like to be afraid, to feel trapped, and because, she paused, her voice dropping to a whisper, because I love you too. Ethan pulled her to him and they kissed, finally. No barriers between them. No secrets or shame or fear. Just two people who'd found each other in the dark and refused to let go. The diner erupted in applause. Customers who'd been watching, whispering, were now clapping, cheering, some even crying. Elena laughed against Ethan's lips, and for the first time in months, she felt whole. 2 years later, the auditorium was packed. Families filled the seats, cameras flashed, and the air buzzed with excitement. It was graduation day at Hillcrest Medical School, and Elena Carter sat among her classmates, cap and gown perfectly in place, her heart racing. She'd made it. Against every odd, every obstacle, every moment she thought she'd break, she'd made it. Her name was called. Elena Carter. She stood, walked across the stage, and accepted her diploma. The weight of it in her hands felt like vindication, like proof that she was more than where she came from, that she was defined by what she'd overcome, not what she'd lost. She looked out into the audience and found him immediately. Ethan, sitting beside her mother, both of them crying, both of them beaming with pride. Maria looked healthy, vibrant, living in a nice apartment that Elena and Ethan had insisted on. She had the best doctors, the best care, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't struggling. Elena's eyes locked with Ethan's, and he mouthed, I'm so proud of you. She smiled, tears streaming down her face, and mouthed back, I know. As she walked off the stage, diploma in hand, Elena thought back to that night in the alley, the choice that had cost her everything. And she realized something. She'd saved Ethan's life that night, but in the end, he'd helped her save her own. Sometimes one decision changes everything. Elena chose humanity over ambition, and it cost her everything she thought she wanted. But in losing her dream, she found something more valuable, herself. She found her strength, her voice, her worth, and she found love. Not the kind that rescues you, but the kind that stands beside you while you rescue yourself. What would you have done? Answered the phone or saved the stranger? Have you ever sacrificed something important for someone else, only to discover it led you exactly where you needed to be? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how one choice changed your life. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful destinations, subscribe to True Soul Narratives. We're here to bring you stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all what it means to be human. Hit that subscribe button and join our family, because everyone deserves a story that speaks to their soul. Until next time, remember, you are not defined by what you lose. You are defined by what you choose. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in second chances.